water. Rather, there was no concept of the dignity of man. There was no concept of equality of human beings. There were thefts, there were killings, and everywhere there were violent behaviors. And the widows normally in some tribes, they were taken as the property by their sons to inherit. Even people belonging to many pagan Arab society, tribes, they used to perform tawaf of Kaaba in naked forms, along with singings and clapping their hands. The poor and the needy and the slaves, they had no place in that society. They were totally humiliated. There was no concept of benevolence, no concept of generosity, no concept of truthfulness. Then there was no concept of knowledge. The society was totally illiterate. There was no book to read, no school to go to. The people of pagan Arab society, they used to hate reading and writing. They used to depend just on their memories, and this was their pride. In all these situations, all historical global civilizations had already dispersed, and they have been demolished by the passage of time. There was Sumeric civilization, a very cultured society, but it did not exist at that time. It was finished along with all of its influences. There used to be in the history Egyptian civilization, but along with all its contribution, it no more existed at that time. There used to be Greek civilization, which became the founder of philosophy and science of that time, but again, because of its downfall, it had no influence in other parts of the world. It was paralyzed. There used to be Iranian civilization. There used to be Indian civilization. There used to be Roman civilization. And there was in sometimes Byzantine civilization, the latest civilization of that time. But all civilizations had ceased to be effective or to exist as alive civilizations of the world. Europe at that time was in total darkness. In this particular situation, Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was raised. And the most interesting thing is that when he was raised, he came in this particular society, in this particular set of global circumstances and global atmosphere, where there was no concept of any good, any moral attitude, any ethical behavior, any spiritual values. In this particular society, a person who was raised as the messenger of God, a holy person who was raised as the last prophet of Almighty Allah, in that pagan Arab society consisted of all these bad character. He came, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, and introduced a new civilization to the world. He introduced a new culture to the history of mankind. The new culture in the name of Islam, which was based on his revealed book Quran, and the practical model and conduct given by his personal life, that was known as his Sunnah and Seerah. The culture, new culture which emerged from his teachings, which emerged from his conduct, and it was given the name of Islam. He came with that message in that particular environment, in that particular atmosphere, where there was no place for knowledge, in a society where there was no place of any good, in a society where there was no place of any moral behavior and any ethical attitude, in a society where there was no place for any truthfulness, no place for any modesty, no place for softness, no place for kindness, no place for soft-heartedness, no place for generosity, no place for good moral, ethical and spiritual manners, no place for pure behavior of human life, no place for human dignity. In this particular society, he was raised and he announced the basic foundations of his culture, of his message, of his deen, of his religion, of his teachings. And the culture which he established, and the culture which he introduced to the mankind, and a new chapter which he wrote in the history of humanity, that consisted of basic and foundational values and principles, basic fundamental principles. It was based on the concept of human dignity. He introduced the concept of human equality. He came up with the concept of human liberty and freedom. He stood up with the concept of brotherhood and generosity. He came up with the concept of socio-economic justice in the society. He stood up with the concept of tolerance and moderation. And he stood up with the concept of peace and security. And he started his movement from the message of knowledge. The first revelation of Holy Quran, which actually became the first message delivered by him to the mankind, when he came down from the cave of Hira to the valley of Mecca. The Meccans were his audience, those who were proud of their illiteracy. And he came up with the first message of divine revelation to them. And he is starting his divine mission of prophethood with the message of knowledge, in a society which is known to be the enemy of knowledge, with the words Iqra bismi rabbikal ladhi khalaq khalaqal insana min alaq Iqra wa rabbukal akram alladhi allama bil qalam allama al insana ma lam ya'lam. Read